Welcome back to the Brittany Hughes Show. Happy Thursday, everybody. I hope you had a fantastic Memorial Day weekend with friends and family and whoever you commemorated that holiday with, as we honor our fallen veterans and soldiers who gave their ultimate sacrifice to this country. As we ring in the summer, we continue to deal with the fallout, unfortunately, from 4 years of open border policies under former President Joe Biden, with the media, of course, telling us that there's nothing at all to see here, that this isn't a problem. Letting in millions of undocumented, unvetted people into this country is not a problem, except, of course, for President Donald Trump leading the Gestapo to the doors of innocent people who simply came here for a better life. Unless, of course, you are a white South African farmer fleeing racial violence in your home country who came here legally, and then you should just go back to Holland or whatever. But if you came here from Central or South America and you don't share any of our cultural norms and you don't speak the language and you have no plans to assimilate into this country, and you're one of millions of unvetted, undocumented people who was allowed to come into this country, that's perfectly fine. It's not, of course, and we continue to see mounting piles of evidence as to why illegal immigration is a problem, why any sovereign nation that respects the rule of law and wants to have at least some semblance of order to their society is detrimentally affected by just illegal immigration, not just in trickles, but in droves, which is what we saw under Joe Biden. 2 illegal aliens have been arrested in connection with the death of a young Air Force Academy cadet candidate who was killed while kayaking on a Texas lake last weekend. Here's the story, and if it does not make your blood boil, I don't know what will. 18-year-old Ava Moore was reportedly struck by somebody driving a jet ski while she was kayaking on Grapevine Lake Sunday evening over Memorial Day weekend. Witnesses at the scene told police that the jet ski was driving at a high rate of speed in the lake, which was filled with swimmers and kayakers and other people in other watercraft, as you might expect on a busy Memorial Day weekend. The woman who was kayaking with Moore, the young lady who was killed, said that they were actually headed in a different direction and were trying to get away from the jet skiers because of how fast and how recklessly they were driving so close to other people in the water. But before she could manage to get to another part of the lake, Moore was struck from behind by one of the jet skiers. When the operator of the jet ski realized that she had been injured, this woman immediately fled the scene. She made for the beach and she tried to get away through the crowd. She was later identified as 21-year-old Dikerlin Alejandra Gonzalez. Not that she stuck around to identify herself. She didn't. That had to be done after the fact, after police tracked her down, because her first reaction to running this young woman over with a jet ski and killing her was to make a break for it. There's video of all of this, by the way. And if you watch it, it clearly shows Gonzalez, who is the woman in the blue bikini here. She's repeatedly attempting to get away from this crowd of people who surrounded her, trying to keep her from leaving. She was trying to flee the scene, and they were attempting to communicate with her that she couldn't just leave. She just hit somebody on a jet ski. She had to stay, of course. But she and several other people who it appears she has some relationship with, it looks like there were a group of them. It looks like they're all just screaming in Spanish. They appear to be confused. At one point, you can see Gonzalez and another woman that she is with, the woman in the white bikini here in this video, being hustled away into a vehicle. The woman in the white bikini was apparently her passenger on the jet ski. And there's a guy just throwing all of their stuff into the back of the car. These people had no intention of sticking around. No intention of trying to help the young woman that Gonzalez had just run over. No intention of waiting for the police. The intent here, it seems very clear to me, was to get the heck out of Dodge as fast as humanly possible to avoid any consequences for this accident and the negligence that apparently caused it. And the only reason that that didn't work is because it was Memorial Day weekend and this place was packed with tons of people with cell phones. So at the same time that all of this is going on and Gonzalez and her, posse are fleeing the scene, several people had hauled Moore out of the water. They were attempting to give her first aid. 911 was called and first responders showed up to the scene as quickly as they could, but her injuries were too severe and she was pronounced dead on the way to the hospital. Gonzalez managed to flee the scene in a car driven by a man. He was later identified as 22-year-old Mikel Coelho Perozo, who is also a Venezuelan, also in the country illegally. Upon investigation, it turns out that Gonzalez is an illegal alien from Venezuela who had illegally entered the United States on September 28, 2023. She was apprehended by Border Patrol the same day she was turned loose by the Biden administration as one of literally millions of illegal aliens who were set loose into the country after crossing the border unlawfully, just a rotating turnstile of God only knows who. And this pair had to be tracked down by law enforcement from about a half a dozen agencies, including Texas Park and Wildlife, the Grapevine Police Department, the Dallas Police Department, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And they were eventually found out hiding out in a nearby home, and they were arrested the next morning. So both of these people, Gonzalez and Perozo, have been charged in connection with Moore's death. Gonzalez is being held on a $500,000 bond. She has been charged with felony manslaughter, reckless operation, and excessive speed of a personal watercraft, and leaving the scene of an accident involving death. And here's where it gets even crazier. So in addition to charges also stemming from, Moore's death and helping the woman who allegedly killed her get away, Perozo, the man who was driving the getaway car, has been charged with fleeing the scene of a car crash after he reportedly ran into two parked cars as he was fleeing the scene. So police say that he hit two parked vehicles on his way out of Dodge before both of them abandoned the car and fled on foot. So let me see if I'm understanding correctly. This woman hits a woman on a jet ski, kills her, flees the scene, gets in the car with a dude who then drives away, hits two parked vehicles. They abandon the car and flee on foot. Not exactly the smoothest criminals here. And in addition to these charges, of course, both are also being investigated for immigration violations. And meanwhile, Ava Moore, who had just graduated from high school days before this, she was set to go to the Air Force Academy. She was a fantastic student. She had a bright future ahead of her, and now she's dead. Killed by the wanton negligence of an illegal alien who should not have been in this country in the first place, but was because the Biden administration rolled out the red carpet to anybody and everyone who wanted to come, including crazy people who drive jet skis too fast in crowded lakes and then intentionally flee the scene after they kill somebody. How many times do we have to see this movie? How many times do we have to read this story over and over and over again? I mean, it seems like every other day we're reading a story about an illegal alien who should not be in this country, who was allowed to come in, where we just threw out our own laws to our own detriment, and now people are dead in the streets, and their families are having to live with that for the rest of their lives. This is having real-world consequences. Is this who the left thinks adds to the great fabric of our nation? Yeah, just peak humanity here. And I know the immediate response that you get from leftists who just cannot wrap their minds around the simple fact that it is not a good idea to just open the floodgates of your nation to anybody who wants to come here, regardless of whether they want to do it the right way. I mean, the immediate response is going to be, okay, well, people get hurt on lakes all the time. Americans kill people through negligence all the time. This is not an illegal alien specific thing, to which I would respond, yes, absolutely. But you don't solve a problem by importing more of the same. It's like saying, well, we've already got gangs in Chicago and LA and New York. Why not just bring in some cartel members to add to the mix? Well, we already have murderers and rapists and thieves in America. That doesn't mean that you bring in more. That doesn't mean that you exacerbate the problem. And by the way, here's why doing this the right way matters. Here's why legal immigration matters. Let me spell this out for you in case you are not smart enough or you cannot be bothered to connect the dots here. I can tell you. And this is the first thing that I thought of upon reading this story, this horribly tragic tale of yet another young woman who lost her life thanks to the actions of an illegal alien. Here's the first thing that I thought of. I can tell you, as someone who spent 2 years living in a Latin American country, this is why legal immigration and assimilation matters. And so often those two things go hand in hand. When you come here legally, not only are you declaring the respect that you have for the rule of law and the country that you plan to integrate yourself into, but you are also able to come here legally and free of fear of being deported. And so you are able to integrate into the society that you have decided is so much better than the one that you came from, that you are willing to stand in line and come legally to this country versus coming illegally, where now you have to live by cover of night in your own little community that you create, where you have now a cultural bubble and you are not required to assimilate into the greater culture. There is a reason that this matters. In many Latin American cultures, particularly Central American nations, I can tell you that the rule of law is a suggestion at best. I'm not saying they don't have laws. I'm not saying that nobody is ever required to follow them. But in many cases, it is a much looser interpretation. In many places, if you can bribe a cop, the law doesn't apply to you. Things like traffic laws might as well not exist. In countries like Venezuela, violence and crime are so common, half the time it's the police themselves that are perpetrating it, and that is accepted as a cultural norm. The framework, the basic understanding for things like safety laws or traffic laws or local ordinances or licenses, they do not exist like they do in the United States. It's why you can't just learn how to drive in Venezuela and then pick up and drive in the United States. It is not a one-to-one comparison. It is not the same thing. This is driving in Venezuela. It is a whole other ball game. It's a whole other country, a whole other way of doing things, a whole other way of looking at life and moving about in society. And when you come to the United States legally, when you come here with the intention to assimilate into this country and into this culture, there is a learning curve. And you learn not only from the cultural norms that exist here that help create the society that we all live in and we benefit from, but you learn the laws and the reason why we have them. And then you go to places that have a heavy migrant presence, and I'm not talking about legal immigrants who come here the right way and who went through the process and are cementing themselves as solid legal citizens or residents. I'm talking about migrants, illegal aliens from other countries and cultures who then take over entire areas. You don't usually see a place that is cleaned up and run well. You see little hamlets, little pockets of a culture that does not mesh with the way we do things in the United States. And that is a problem for a reason. There is a reason that people from cultures that have not exactly been conducive to humanity end up coming here. But when you do so merely to get out of the crap hole that you're in without any desire to actually become an American and adopt the norms of this country, you're looking to escape. You're looking to get away from someplace, not necessarily come to someplace. There is a difference. And you end up carting over a lot of the same cultural problems that destroyed your homeland. Kind of like when a liberal moves from California to Texas to escape things like crime and high taxes, but don't make the connection that the liberal ideologies that they are entrenched in are the reason why they had high crime and taxes. And so they end up bringing all of their garbage socialist ideas to Texas and creating the same problems that they were trying to get away from in the first place. Do you see what I'm saying here? There's a linear progression. This is what happens when people from, say, Venezuela come here not to be an American, but to be a Venezuelan living in America. Big difference. Because here's the thing, and this is the first thing that I thought of when I read this story. I don't know that this woman driving this jet ski could even speak English. From the video here, it does not look like it. I have no idea if she could read the safety signs plastered all over this lake. I don't know if she even knew how to safely operate a jet ski. She certainly didn't know how or either care to operate it safely. I have no idea that she understood the framework that was in place to try to keep people safe. I've seen vehicles in multiple Central American countries where, the painted lines on the road might as well not even exist. I don't know that this woman understood the safety laws or water lanes, or that you can't just fly around a crowded lake on a motorized vehicle like a bat out of hell. What might seem like common sense to you and I might not be so obvious to someone whose native culture just does not think this way. And I know that's insane to us, just like it's insane to us that you would just leave piles of garbage on the sidewalk, or that somebody might defecate in the street, or that you can't just eat a dog. But these are norms in many parts of the world that are not just abandoned when a person comes here, especially if they come illegally and are just turned loose into the country to bring all of that stuff here. This matters. This is what happens when you invite countless people, completely unimpeded, unvetted, unassimilated, into an otherwise civilized, structured society. It is not a commentary on the inherent value of the human being. But not all cultures are created equal. It's why so many of them around the world are imploding, and people are trying to escape here, but without understanding why here is better. And turning loose millions of people who cannot speak our native language, who don't understand our traffic laws, who cannot read our signs, who do not know our cultural norms, who don't understand that we're a nation of laws and ordinances that need to be followed, who cannot even safely and effectively communicate with the people around them, who come from countries where things like this don't exist, and it's much more of a free-for-all. This is going to have an effect. For example, at the same time, there are a dozen San Diego area businesses right now who are suing the city of San Diego for failing to enforce laws against illegal food vendors. They're saying that there's sidewalk carts and pop-up establishments. Many of them are being operated by illegal aliens that are harming their businesses. So there are 12 eateries. These range from hot dog shops to delis to family-owned cafes and high-end steak houses that are now suing the city because they are being run out of business by illegal alien food vendors. They're also suing Mayor Todd Gloria and the San Diego City Council. In their suit, they allege that the city is failing to enforce the laws that have cost them thousands of dollars in revenue and have even forced them to either change their menus to compete with illegal food carts, many of which sell hot dogs, or shut down their businesses altogether. So Mario Cito, who is the owner of Ghost Heist Tacos, it was formerly Donner Mediterranean Grill, said that he had to change his entire business model from a shawarma establishment to a taco restaurant because he had to get his food costs down in order to compete with the illegal snack and hot dog stands that are parked on the sidewalk right outside his restaurant. He told ABC 10 News that he estimates he loses between $1,000 and $2,500 a night to these food carts that have been siphoning business away from his restaurant. So these are street vendors, and they set up these rolling carts that can be easily dismantled and pushed away in the event of a raid by cops, which if you watch video of them fleeing some of these raids when police finally do show up to clear these establishments out, these are most often migrants, many of them illegal, and they can rip the covers off and roll these carts away quickly and then just go set them up a few blocks down on another street corner. They sell everything from flowers and novelties to snacks and prepared food, and they're not subjected, of course, to the same taxes, the same liability laws, health regulations, business requirements as a licensed establishment would be. So some dude with this rolling cart can just stroll to the local Piggly Wiggly and buy a pack of hot dogs and cook them up in dirty water and then sell them for $4 a pop. And he's not meeting health standards. He's not paying taxes. If you come down with E. coli, there's nobody to sue. And these regulations, as onerous as they may be sometimes, and there has to be a balance, right? But these regulations exist for a reason, to protect consumers. And it is unjust to apply them to business owners that are dealing with the cost of operating a brick and mortar restaurant and not apply them to illegal food vendors. But see, these things don't exist. Those laws, those regulations, they don't exist in many parts of the world, including in many Central and South American countries where street vendors are totally normal. You don't need any license at all. So then these people come here. Often illegally, they are turned loose into a country where they don't have a job, they don't have any means of supporting themselves, and they start hawking stuff on the sidewalk to make a buck because that's what they could do in their home country and they don't know any better. Or if they do, they figure that the law or the ordinance is just a suggestion. And now the cafe that's been in business for 40 years selling pastries suddenly has to compete with, Juanita selling store-bought donuts at a tax-free markup on a cart right outside their door. And so in 2022, after a lot of pushback from businesses, the city of San Diego tried, at least nominally, to do something about this. They tried enforcing some of the local laws. They tried restricting where even licensed vendors could set up shop. And who did they get pushback from? Migrant advocacy groups. Migrant advocacy groups who argued that migrants, i.e. illegal aliens predominantly, would be disproportionately harmed by crackdowns on street vendors. And businesses are sick of it. So there's a pub that is now closed. It was called Henry's Pub. It was once a very popular eatery in San Diego's gas lamp quarter where sidewalk vendors are prohibited by local law, but they're all over the place anyway because nobody does anything about it. Henry's Pub was forced to close after 25 years in business, but not without some serious drama before last call. So cell phone footage caught the viral moment that one pub employee flipped over an illegal street vendor's cart on the sidewalk just feet from the restaurant's door before getting into a very profane back and forth with an onlooker who apparently was very upset with him because these businesses, they have no recourse. The city is not protecting them. The liberals that run it and the liberals that were running our country for the past 4 years have made it abundantly clear that they will prioritize the well-being and the desires of people whose first act upon coming into this country is to do so illegally, but who are allowed to set up shop regardless of their ability or their desire to assimilate into this country and follow our laws. And so now businesses that have existed for decades are going broke, and a young woman in Texas is dead, just one more in a long line of bodies piling up thanks to Joe Biden and his illegal immigration frenzy. And we're all supposed to pretend that there's absolutely nothing to see here whatsoever, and this is totally fine, and that Donald Trump is the big mean bully being hateful to people. I mean, that's CNN's take. CNN ran an entire segment this week on a young woman named Jimena Arias Cristobal. She's a 19-year-old illegal alien living in Georgia, and she was pulled over by a police officer after he mistook her dark gray truck for a very similar black truck that had made an illegal turn. So the cop made a mistake when it came to this traffic violation, but after pulling her over and running her information, it turns out Cristobal was living in the United States illegally, which is a crime, and she got caught. So she was taken into custody. She was turned over to ICE, where she spent several weeks in an immigration detention center, which is exactly, by the way, what would happen to you if you were caught illegally in pretty much any country outside of Western civilization. You would be detained, you would be kicked out, you might possibly be jailed, you could be barred from ever entering that country again. And absolutely nobody would feel sorry for you, wouldn't even make the local news. But in the United States, see, we're not allowed to enforce our own immigration laws or hold people accountable for violating it. So this woman was held for a few weeks, and then she was released on bond and sent back to her family in Georgia, who are also here illegally, by the way, because what's a little immigration violation? Who cares? So she's still here illegally. Her family is still here illegally. But this story has garnered all of this outrage among leftists who are not outraged that we have people living here illegally in violation of our immigration law. They're outraged that anybody's doing anything about it. So now her lawyers are saying that they're looking into the possibility of applying for something called a U visa, which is a very special, very specific kind of visa that is for people who help law enforcement in investigating crimes by providing aid or information. Her lawyers say that because Cristobal was wrongly pulled over and that mistake ultimately led to the resignation of the officer who had screwed up, that's tantamount to aiding police in an investigation, and therefore she and her family should be allowed to stay on a U visa. Try to connect those dots, if you will. That's just a tangled ball of logic yarn right there. These are the backbends that leftists are willing to do for people who have openly declared that they have no respect whatsoever for the laws of this country, but we have to twist our laws in order to accommodate them. This is not what a U visa is supposed to be, but who cares? We've already completely butchered the definition of asylum and refugee. What's just another law being completely twisted out of context and misused to give amnesty to lawbreakers? But I digress. So CNN, of course, picked up this water and carried it. So they ran a whole segment on this woman who they obviously see as the helpless victim in this whole story. Who cares if she and her family are here illegally? Who cares if they cut in line in front of millions of others around the world waiting to come here the legal way? Who cares? She's the victim, and the Trump administration and ICE are the Nazis who are targeting her and her poor family for no reason. Because according to CNN, illegal immigration isn't even a crime. Here was the actual segment that they ran and the young woman's response to that line of reasoning.
So what do you say to the Trump administration and those who argue that by simply being here, you're breaking the law?
My family and I were aware that we broke the law by being here without the proper documentation, but I think we tried to take the steps to do so, and the system didn't really allow us to. So I would just tell them to be a little bit understanding, be a little bit compassionate towards people in my situation.
Now, I'm not going to lie. I don't know what's more rich. The fact that CNN actually stated, as though it were fact, that coming here illegally is not a crime, which is the very definition of illegal. So that's a demonstrable, factual, that's just wrong. Or the fact that this young woman admitted, no, she and her family actually knew full well that they were committing a crime when they came here illegally and decided to stay illegally. It wasn't like they thought that jumping the Rio Grande and just walking into the United States and then living here for years and years and years without documentation was the legal way to do this. There was no confusion on their part, and she admits this. They knew full well what they were doing when they were doing it. And I think that's the problem that I and millions of Americans have. If you want to know why we are so angry and so frustrated over this situation, and why we have so little sympathy, not for the people who want to come into the United States, not for the people who are trying to escape difficult situations in other parts of the world and want to come to America for a better life. That's totally understandable. I don't fault those people at all. But for people who intentionally come here illegally and they know it and they admit it and they just don't care. There's no remorse. There is no admission that it is unfair and unjust to the law, to the country whose laws you are violating, to the people who live here and who you are disrespecting and flipping off, to the other would-be immigrants who desperately want to come here and are waiting legally and getting their papers in order. They don't care. Here's CNN trying to cover for these people like, oh, well, this wasn't even really a crime. And here's an illegal alien woman saying, no, we actually knew full well that it was. But hey, after decades of being here illegally and knowing exactly what we were doing, well, now we're trying to sort it out. And it's the system's fault for not letting us. So the same system that you ignored when you decided to come here illegally, knowing it was wrong, the same system that would have protected you just fine had you actually used it and followed it, now you're blaming that system for why your fat's in the fryer? No, you don't get to do that. We have a system. You thumbed your nose at it and said you didn't want to abide by it. And now it is in no obligation, under no obligation whatsoever, to protect you. You get to face the music. Do not let the media for one moment gaslight you into believing that none of this is wrong and illegal immigration was never a crime and these people are just helpless victims who had no idea how to do it the right way and were so desperate that they didn't have a choice and they came here thinking that it was perfectly okay. No, they didn't. They knew. They admit it. Imagine for a second if I did that. Imagine if an American citizen were like, I don't know, I just didn't pay taxes for 20 years. Just didn't do it. I knew I was supposed to, and I just didn't want to. Or I didn't feel like I had the money at the time, so I just didn't pay taxes. And now I'm at risk of getting caught and facing consequences for it. And so now I'm going to try to make it right after the fact. I shouldn't have to actually pay the taxes that I've avoided for the past 2 decades. I shouldn't face jail time. I shouldn't have to pay a fine. I shouldn't be, punished for willfully living in violation of the law to the detriment of this country and the other law-abiding people in it who were paying their taxes. I should just get all of that swept under the rug because I'm generally a good person and I didn't want to hurt anybody, and it would just be mean to hold me accountable. I'll just start paying taxes now and we'll just kind of pretend that the rest didn't happen. Whoopsies. How fast do you think that'd fly with the IRS? It wouldn't. It wouldn't. If we were just like, hey, I've been committing fraud and embezzling money for years. Now, don't fault me for that. Don't punish me for that. I'll just stop now, and the system should help me. The system should be okay with that. I mean, you're saying that it's the obligation, that the onus is on the country whose laws you have violated to now come in and help you. That's mind-boggling. And it's no wonder that so many people are fed up with that idea being shoved down our throats, like the obligation is on us. That's not how this works. The left and the media are losing their minds that the Trump administration is now rounding up illegal aliens and arresting them outside courthouses when they show up for their immigration hearings and the judge drops their case. Like, that's not exactly what should happen. You don't get a pass for years of willfully violating the law just because you realize that you might now get caught because we've got somebody in office who actually cares, and now you're scrambling to try to fix it so you don't get booted. You had years to get this right. You could have done it right in the first place. You had that option. It was available to you. You chose not to do it. The Trump administration is not the bully for coming in and righting a wrong and fixing a problem that the left created that has been exploited by people who knew full well that it wasn't right. And now Ava Moore is dead and her blood is soaked into the same ground as Jocelyn Nungare's and Rachel Morin's and Laken Riley's. Business owners are having to close up their doors that they worked hard to establish, where they paid taxes and got licenses and faithfully served their communities. And they are having to close up their doors because they cannot compete with migrants and their illegal pop-up carts that have taken over their city. ICE is having to round up illegal alien gangbangers and sex criminals in Nantucket. This problem has ballooned out of control, and we're supposed to be upset because the surgery that is now necessary to fix this problem is uncomfortable for some people. Bummer. I think millions of people would agree that we are done being screwed over by illegal aliens who do not respect our laws, by leftists who want to force us to pay for all of their compassion, which looks an awful lot like an intentional societal reset for political gain. No, I'm not funding your woke ideology. No, I'm not funding your gender-bending crusade against children. I'm not funding your endless aid programs for foreign countries while ours falls apart. And I'm not funding a revolving door at the border that allows in people who will do things like run a woman over with a jet ski and leave her to die. We are done. Done. That's what you're seeing from the Trump administration. That is what tens of millions of people who voted in this administration voted for. This is not an accident. This is not a shock. This is righting a wrong that has been allowed to exist for far too long and that has left bodies in the streets. and we're done. Any compassion that I had is buried underneath the victims of illegal immigration crime and the detrimental effects that it has had on this country. And with that, that's the Brittany Hughes Show for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Make sure to tune in next Thursday. In the meantime, head over to the Apple Podcast Store, hit the subscribe button on the Brittany Hughes Show. That way you won't ever miss an episode. Also, subscribe to the Newsbusters podcast on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. That one's with Tim Graham. You're not going to want to miss that. I'll see you guys back here next Thursday. In the meantime, have a fantastic weekend and a blessed week ahead.